It started as a joke, really. One of those stupid, offhand ideas that somehow spirals into something real before anyone stops to think it through. My coworker James had been binging ghost hunting videos at work during his lunch breaks, those grainy, overproduced YouTube shows with dramatic music and shaky night vision cameras. He claimed they were for research, but mostly he just liked watching grown men scream at cold drafts. We worked together at a small design firm. Nothing fancy. A few graphic projects, some brand revamps. It paid the bills and left us just enough energy to go out drinking on weekends. But around late October last year, everyone was suddenly in a spooky mood. Haunted house stories, horror movie marathons, dumb what would you do scenarios. So when James suggested we do our own ghost hunt, we laughed, but none of us said no. There were four of us: me, James, Lila, our copywriter, and Eric, who mostly worked remote but came in now and then to remind us he was still alive. James knew a spot, of course he did. An old house in the woods about 20 minutes outside the city. Technically, it was the remains of an estate, the brick shell of a once grand mansion, collapsed in on itself, surrounded by tangled trees and overgrowth. The kind of place with just enough history to be creepy, but not enough to be protected by anyone. I asked how he found it. He said his cousin went there once, back in high school, for some dare. He claimed there were symbols etched into the stone, old broken furniture inside, and that they heard someone walking around on the upper floor, except the floor had collapsed years before. Typical urban legend stuff. Still, the idea stuck. And by that Friday night, we were piling into James's Jeep with thermoses of coffee, flashlights, and a half-charged EMF reader he bought online for way too much money. We got there just after midnight. The woods were dead silent. Even the air felt heavier, like the trees were holding their breath. The ruins were farther from the road than I expected. We had to hike about 15 minutes down a barely visible path, our boots crunching on fallen leaves, flashlights jittering from hand to hand. I don't know what I expected to feel, but it wasn't this. The moment I saw the house, something in my gut twisted. It wasn't just the decay, or the fact that the moonlight barely reached the place. It was something subtler, like I was looking at a wound in the land, like the house wasn't rotting, it was feeding. Lila was already snapping pictures. Eric was trying to get a signal on his phone. James led the way, of course, narrating like we were live streaming a real investigation. I hung back. The structure itself was barely standing. 3 of the 4 outer walls remained, ivy-choked and blackened by age. The inside was worse. Mold and mildew clung to every surface. A broken staircase curved upward into nothing. James insisted we each walk through the house alone for 5 minutes. Said it was a control variable for comparing reactions. We rolled our eyes but agreed. Lila went first, then Eric, then me. When I stepped inside, I expected the usual chills, the typical echo of your own footsteps, maybe even a bird fluttering out of the rafters. But it was quiet, too quiet. I didn't hear anything, not the wind, not insects, not even the crunch of dirt beneath my feet. Just the slow thud of my heartbeat and the distant static buzz of the EMF reader, which I hadn't even turned on yet. Then I heard something breathing. Not loud, not gasping, just soft, labored, wet. It came from above me. But when I looked up, there was no floor, just broken beams, jagged edges, and open sky. I froze, tried to convince myself it was a raccoon, a trick of sound, echoes bouncing weird in the ruined architecture. Then a pebble fell near my foot, from above. I backed out, nearly tripping over a root in the doorway. My flashlight flickered twice before stabilizing. When I turned around, Lila and James were laughing. "Get spooked?" she asked. I nodded, keeping my voice even. "There's something up there, could be an animal." James raised an eyebrow. "There's no second floor, man." I didn't respond. Eric stayed outside after that. He said his stomach felt weird, said he didn't want to puke in a haunted house. We stayed maybe 20 more minutes, walking around the perimeter, trying to record EVPs. James asked dumb questions into the dark. "Is anyone here with us? What's your name? Did you die here?" Static. Crackling. One loud pop we thought was a branch snapping. When we left, James was the last one out. I remember he lingered by the doorway holding the EMF reader in one hand, muttering something to himself. Then he snapped a picture, smiled to himself, and jogged to catch up with us. None of us saw the figure standing in the top window frame. Later, when we looked through the photos on Lila's camera, there it was. A silhouette, gaunt, slightly tilted, like it wasn't used to standing upright. James thought it was amazing. Lila said it must have been a shadow, a trick of the flash. Eric didn't want to talk about it. I told myself it was nothing. But that night, when I got home, my dog wouldn't come near me. She barked at me as I stepped inside. Not the excited kind of bark. This was sharp, hostile. She backed into the hallway, growling low, fur bristling. I had never seen her like that. I crouched, whispered her name, held my hand out. She bolted to the bedroom and wouldn't come out. I didn't sleep well. At exactly 3:17 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open on its own. I live alone. I sat up fast, pulse thumping. Listened. Footsteps. Slow. Dragging. Coming from the kitchen. I told myself it was the pipes. My place creaked a lot. It was nothing. Then I heard breathing again. That same wet, labor breathing from the ruins. And this time, I didn't want to get up and check. I didn't want proof. Because deep down, I already knew something had followed me home. I didn't mention anything to the others the next day. At work, everything looked normal. Lila was proofreading ads, James was fixing a client's logo, and Eric was logged in remotely. No one brought up the photos. No one mentioned the EVP recording. I knew James had stayed up half the night listening to it. Still, I felt different. Not scared more, like observed. Like something behind me was always one thought ahead. Screen reflections felt slightly distorted. Shadows stretched oddly. My dog refused to enter my room, slept by the door instead, whimpered quietly in her sleep. One night, I caught her staring at the ceiling, ears back, pupils huge, like she saw something I didn't. By the third night, I was waking up at the same time, 3:17. No noise, no dreams, just sudden awareness and a chill in the air. The room smelled faintly like soil. Then small things started moving. A glass I left out appeared in the sink. A pen rolled off my desk when no one was near. The television turned on twice to a screen of static no input, no audio. I blamed exhaustion. My mind was playing tricks. I even looked for mice or bad wiring, but there were no signs, and I always checked the door. On the sixth night, I heard a whisper. Not words, just a sound, like someone trying to speak underwater, warped and muffled. It came from the hallway. I sat up slowly, trying not to breathe. The whisper came again, a little closer. Then I saw it. A figure, faint but tall, standing just beyond the doorway, tilted. Still, it looked exactly like the shape in the photo. I didn't move, not because I was frozen in fear, but because I had a stronger, clearer thought this thing wanted me to react, like it needed me to see it. So I laid back, eyes open, body rigid. After a while, the figure faded. I barely slept. The next morning, I started researching not ghosts, but signs. Waking at the same time, animal behavior, shifting objects, audio distortions. That's when I found the term attachment. Not a haunting, not possession, something that follows, drawn to people who cross into certain places and pay too much attention. It doesn't feed on fear, it feeds on recognition. I remembered how I had stood there, silent, listening, how I hadn't brushed it off. I had noticed it, and now it had noticed me. I told James quietly, over lunch at a crowded cafe. He laughed at first, nervously. Then he admitted something weird had happened. His bathroom mirror had cracked straight down the middle for no reason. Lila hadn't seen anything, but said she'd been waking up every night at 3:17. Her nose would bleed lightly each time. Eric hadn't answered our group chat in 2 days. We went to check on him. His apartment window looked fogged from the inside. We buzzed. No reply. The building manager let us in. Inside, it was freezing. The air smelled of mold and dust. Every mirror had been covered with sheets or flipped to face the wall. Eric sat on the floor in the center of the living room, eyes sunken, mumbling to himself. James leaned in, then stepped back. "He's saying the time," he whispered. 3:17, over and over. We called for help, said he was having a breakdown. He didn't resist, didn't speak to us, just stared past us as they led him out. After that, I stopped asking questions. I made rules. I threw away the EMF reader, deleted every file, burned the clothes I wore that night. And I moved, far away. New city, new job. Things improved. The wake-up stopped. My dog started sleeping beside me again. The air in my new place stayed still. But some nights, I still wake up. For no reason, always at 3:17. And in that silence, I hear a soft rustle. Like something shifting its weight. Like something remembering me. Like something still waiting for me to notice it again.